January 11, 1976, the then Nigerian head of state, General Murtala Muhammed, delivered this speech in which he attacked the United States, the UK, Germany, France, and all the Western colonial power who had been on the neck of Africa for a long time. Unfortunately, 34 days after he delivered this speech, which I'm going to read a section of it for you, he was assassinated while going to his office in Lagos. So this video is about the background story into what led into this speech. I'm going to read for you some really interesting points in this speech. Then I'm going to tell you a few other stories which many people probably were not aware of as per the story of how it was murdered. So let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy this video. It all started on Saturday, 3rd of January 1976. The US ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Donald Esum, delivered a letter to the Nigeria head of state, or you call him president. This letter was written by the American president then, Gerald Ford, and it was addressed to the Nigeria counterpart, which happened to be General Murtala Muhammed. The letter was meant to be a secret conversation between these two head of states. After reading through the letter, however, Murtala became furious and he was angry. I was not there, but I could imagine him kicking the table and, shouting on top of his voice at some imaginary representative of the United States. So what is he going to do about this letter? Well, Murtala decided to disgrace the US president by releasing his letter to the press. On Thursday, January 8, 1976, the secret letter of the US president to the Nigeria head of state was published on page 6 of the New York Times for the whole world to read. What? No, you don't do that. Nobody does that. You don't get a sensitive secret letter from the United States president, then give it to the press to publish it for the whole world to read. So if you feel that was a wrong thing, it is because I have not told you some other thing about Murtala. Yeah, he was 36 years old. He was this energetic, ambitious, and sometimes erratic leader. He said things that he shouldn't say, and in this case, he did something that he should not have done.
This is not the first time, of course. First, there was the experiment of a unitary government, which was imposed by the colonial government.
Now, I am going to show you the contents of this letter that Murtala released to the New York Times. But before then, I think I should give you some context so that you will understand why the American president wrote what he wrote in the letter. Starting from the 1950s, African nationalists have started confronting the colonial masters in Africa. You are talking about the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Spain, and plus including the United States influence. So in the decade when Murtala became the Nigerian president, there were three struggles, that is, struggles against the colonial rule that were going on the continent of Africa. First, we have the South African struggle against the apartheid regime, which started on December 7th, 1950. Then second, we have Mozambique War of Independence, which started on September 25, 1964. And third, we have Angola War of Independence, which started on February 4th, 1961. As all these battles, that is, these three major battles, were going on the continent of Africa, what usually happened was that the United States, Germany, and the British Empire, that is, those who were benefiting from the colonial rule in Africa, would usually be at the other side of the battle against the African nationalists. For example, when Africans were fighting against the apartheid regime in the South Africa, the United States was supporting the regime. In the case of Mozambique, Angola, and a few other struggles, the same thing was happening. Now that I have given you a kind of context into what was going on between the US President Gerald Ford and African leaders in the 50s and 60s, so let me read a part of his letter to you. The letter started with, "Your Excellency, during this critical period in Africa and world affairs, I believe it will be useful to give you my views on the Angola situation." That is Angola I've told you about. "Since your government has recognized the MPLA regime as the government of Angola, I believe it is necessary that there be no misunderstanding about our position." In another section of that letter, Ford wrote, "It is our hope that the whole AU, that is Organization of African Union, we insist upon a prompt end to all foreign involvement in Angola." By foreign involvement, you should understand that this includes other African countries that were rallying around Angola to support them, plus, as you will see later in this letter, the Soviet Union. In another section, he wrote, "We will also, in that case, urge South Africa to end its involvement." You know, I told you that will include other countries in Africa that were trying to help Angola in that struggle. Now, pay attention to this last part of the letter. "We cannot, however, stand idly by if the Soviet and Cuban intervention persists." Now, what you have to understand during this era was that Soviet Union was actually supporting Africa's struggle against the colonial rule, which, by the way, is the reason why today many African countries are just in alliance with Putin. This letter went on and on to gently but surely inform Murtala that America is not in support of what he was in support of, and that could be dangerous.
"Hey Murtala, you're working against the US and that could be dangerous for you."
If you care to read the entire thing in the letter, you can easily find it today on the website of the New York Times, which I can add the links in the description. Anyway, Murtala released this letter to the public, as I have told you, which was a big mistake, but that would not have probably been his end if not for what he did next. And that was 5 days later. Murtala decided to attend the meeting of the Organization of African Union in Addis Ababa. Murtala was not just going to attend this meeting, he was going to give a speech, and he was going to talk tough against the colonial masters. And if you are a millennial or you are as young as I am and you see any African leader talking against United States, United Kingdom, Spain, you might think that is how it has always been. Well, I'm sorry to inform you that it used to be very, very, very dangerous. I mean, you could not stand up in 1920s, for example, and speak against Queen Elizabeth. You will be gone. You will be dead. Anyway, let's go through this speech as I will try to pick a few sections of it and read them to you. This is a very long speech. It is 3,448 words long. So there is no way I want to read everything to you, but I'm going to pick some section of it. Mr. Chairman, the history of modern Africa is replete with shameless exploitation, brutalization, repression, and downright denial of the humanity of Africans, side by side with colonialism, which sought to deny self-determination for Africans. Mr. Chairman, when I contemplate the evil of apartheid, my heart bleeds, and I'm sure the heart of every true-blooded African bleeds. When we talk of this evil, we are assured of sympathy of the Western countries. But when we call for sanction to end this shame of Western civilization, suddenly the glitter of gold in the form of high dividend becomes more convincing a consideration than the lives, the liberty, and the well-being of Africans. The Western power have bluntly refused to take any positive action, either in the form of military or economic sanction, which will dissuade the regime in Pretoria, that is in South Africa, from pursuing its criminal policy. Rather, they are encouraged to persist through increased investment, military collaboration, and other forms of cooperation. Now, this is the last part I'm showing you, and I need you to pay attention to every word here. Mr. Chairman, Africa has come of age. It is no longer under the orbit of any extra continental power. It should no longer take orders from any country, however powerful. Well, that statement was dangerous, but there is more. The fortune of Africa are in our hands to make or mar. For too long have we been kicked around. For too long have we been treated like adolescents who cannot discern their interests and act accordingly. For too long has it been presumed that the African needs outside experts to tell him who are his friends and who are his enemies. By the way, you can see a trace of this even till today, right? United States want to tell Africa, oh yeah, you should not do business with Russia because Russia should not be your friend. So, like, this speech was delivered in 1976, and it was the same then as it is now. The West tell Africa, yeah, you shouldn't be friend with that country. No, you cannot be friend with that country. No, you should be friend with us. Now, let's continue because there is more. For too long has it been presumed that the African need outside experts to tell him who are his friends and who are his enemies. The time has come when we should make it clear that we can decide for ourselves, that we know our own interests and how to protect those interests, that we are capable of resolving African problems without presumptuous lesson in ideological danger, which more often than not have no relevancy for us, not for the problem at hand. Now, this is the last statement and you need to listen to it. Nigeria has come to this assembly determined to cooperate with you, Mr. Chairman, and with all member states, listen, to put a stop to foreign interference in our continental matters. That is the only thing you need to hear to understand that, yeah, this guy probably has said what he shouldn't say. Now, declaring for all African countries, yeah, we have to cooperate within ourselves to put a stop to British, American, and all these guys from coming to our continent. We have to just stop them and up their influence. 34 days after delivering this speech, Murtala was going to his office in Lagos when he was shot dead. And of course, as usual, when something like this happened in Africa, you hardly can trace who did that, because in his case, for example, they used a particular Nigerian top military guy who was power testing, decided to carry out a coup which was not successful, but at the end of the day they were able to do what they wanted to do, and that is to take somebody who they perceive to be a big threat to the Western power in Africa. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. If it makes sense to you, you can share it with somebody, and see you in the next one.